Hi everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to HED Talks. We're continuing on. We did origins of what last week? Language. Yes, exactly. Oh, there you are, Pat. We were worried about you.
I was worried about me too.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. And so let's take a little quick review and look at that. All right, so we're gonna do a review of what we talked about last week, and last week was what?
Inquisition.
No, the Inquisition was Monday.
Origin of language.
Thank you, Esther.
Oh, yeah.
I have to laugh at that. I get confused because I do 2 lectures every week, so I get confused too. This might trip me up a little bit today too, because it does kind of connect at the end here. We talked about the origin of language. I'll wait till, okay. So we talked about the origin of language, and does anybody remember how many languages?
Over 7,000.
Yes, excellent. Oh my gosh, Pat.
I know, I was so impressed.
Yes, there are over 7,000 languages spoken today.
Yeah.
Currently spoken today. And what is the most frequently spoken language? The top English, exactly. Yes, the #1 most spoken language is English. And so what we did was we took a look at some of the theories of how language started, how it all began. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So,
The front of the brain.
the front of the brain, the frontal lobe of the brain. Well, what they're thinking, and of course, it's all speculation, right?
Yeah.
They're thinking that it might have had something to do with bipedalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your hands are free, yeah, you can do what? Gesture, Bill, exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. So they think that through the use of facial expressions and hand gestures, language connected with both of those, plus sounds, whatever sounds they were able to make, and that was the beginning of a language, of a communication. But then we took a look at how it is that we speak. Speech itself, right?
Well, I don't know what they call that. The throat. It's
Hyoid bone. Yes, exactly. Yep. That's exactly right. Wow, good memory, you
what is that
guys.
again?
Hyoid.
The what?
Hyoid.
Hyoid.
Yes. Oi.
Oi. Hyoid.
Yes. Oi. Oi, Effie.
Oy vey.
So it was a little bit, in my research, I was sharing with you all last week, the research, it was kind of dry. It wasn't really, because I also have an obligation to entertain you all while you're here. So, but then I did find somebody. Do you remember the guy I found?
Oh, yes, Dan Everett.
Yes, Dan Everett, and I also like to support anyone that's local, and this guy's from Waltham, remember that?
Happy face.
From Bentley. Yeah, well, yeah, he's happy. He gets to go out into the field once a year to study. But one of the things that he's really known for is the fact that he studies the hominid species prior to us, in particular Homo erectus. And it's been thought that because of the hyoid bone, they don't have a shape that would be required for language as we know language. So this is the human hyoid bone, and other species have a hyoid bone, but it's not exactly the same, right? And it needs to be particular in shape, but also what happens to the human hyoid bone that doesn't happen in any other? It moves down, yes, exactly. So it drops. After a few months of birth, it will drop down. And then what does that create?
Speech.
A space that allows us to have a wider range of what?
Sound.
Sound, exactly, verbalizations. Yes, that's exactly correct. So there's a little bit of a risk with that. What's the risk when the hyoid bone drops? Choking, yes, there's a choking risk. But what we get in return, it has stayed that way, because remember, it's over 200,000 years old, but it has stayed that way because the return is worth the risk that we have in choking, because what are we able to do?
Speak.
Yeah, we're able to have a fully functioning language. But Dr. Everett wants to challenge us on that, doesn't he? Do you remember from last week? Yeah, he doesn't think that it's necessarily true that they didn't have the range, they couldn't speak like we speak. They would have actually had like a high pitch voice or utterances. But he thinks it's possible that they could have had a fully functioning language, and that's because of what? Do you remember, where did he go? Exactly, yes. So he goes out into the Amazon, and he's been, for 30 years, he's gone out to do studies with this tribe. And do you remember them?
Yes.
The women have 10 sounds that they make, and the men have 11. Right? And these are the sounds that they make. That's all they have. So with simply this, they have a fully functioning language. Yeah, they have, hey Peggy, they have a fully functioning language. So is it possible that other species prior to Homo sapiens sapien could have had a language?
Yes, sure.
It's possible, yeah, it is possible. And then the other side of the story, the other thing that we need to have is a gene. Do you remember the gene that we have? The FOXP2, you remember that?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what helps us to process languages, and it's connected with learning. So this gene is both what allows us to speak and allows us to learn, because what can a baby do?
You got girls.
The baby can learn what? As many languages as the baby is exposed to, right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Let me go right through there. All right, so the baby is just going to repeat what the mother says, and that's called mother ease. Okay? What?
I love that. Mother Reeves.
Mother ease, yes. It's like if you were to say legalese.
Yeah, right.
It's lawyer jargon. This is motherese. Not that dads don't talk to their babies too. Of course they do, but it's called motherese. All right, so because the FOXP2, babies are able to learn any number of languages that they are exposed to, which is pretty fascinating. Because they're just developing, just starting to develop. And if something goes wrong with the FOXP2,
Oh boy, they don't speak at all.
yeah, yes, yeah, it creates an impairment. You remember that little girl from
Yes.
last week? Oh
Yes.
my gosh, I know, little girl from last week. So it creates an impairment, and sometimes you cannot speak at all with this impairment.
It was interesting that she could understand.
She could understand him. There was such a connection.
It's only the actual vocalization that's missing.
Yes, yeah, yep, yes. I've worked with a number of nonverbal people, and oh yes, and they're very clear about what they want when they want it. Yes, I had no problem. I had no problem understanding. So we also looked last week at this fascinating, this is just so fascinating. Who remembers how close are chimps and gorillas to our Fox P2.
We're pretty close. We're pretty close.
Well, it was 2 amino acids is the difference, and they're the closest. Chimpanzees and gorillas are the closest to the human FOXP2 gene, but they are only 2 amino acids away. And then we also took a look at, do you remember cocoa?
Cocoa, yeah.
Yes, so we took a look at cocoa, and we had a really, just a charming clip of Penny and Coco as they communicated through sign language. It's just a fascinating study. It's a wonderful story. So that is last week in a nutshell.
Yes.
Right? We just blew right through that, didn't we? Because I've got some clips I want to share with you today, so I want to make sure we get through everything. Now, we were thinking, since English is the #1, it's the business language, it's the most widely spoken in the world, in the entire world, why not take a look at the history of English? Doesn't that make sense? It does to everybody except Conrad. He wants me to do French.
Better than Mandarin.
He was. Yeah. So I'm going to try to weave a little French into this and see if that will that will suffice. I'm hoping it will. All right, because I had something else for next week in mind. Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the history of the English language. And you might remember from last week that I was saying that it almost went extinct. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Not once, but twice. There were 2 times. Now it's not very long ago when you look at time, this did not happen too long ago, and yet it almost went extinct twice, and I'm going to tell you how that happened. But first we want to see how it developed. And what is our source? What's our source for that? Can anyone think of what that might be?
Not the dictionary.
The source for first-hand accounting of the development of a new language, a distinct language.
Well,
The source is the Roman Empire.
oh, I was going to say Latin.
The Roman invasion of the British Isles. Okay, so we know that they were there, right?
Yes.
And we know that they wrote back all kinds of tales about how wonderfully they were doing. Julius Caesar was very good at that. And so we're taking the information best we can, with a grain of salt from from their perspective. So our sources are from the Roman Empire. And when they arrive, while they're there, what are they observing? They are observing Celtic peoples, correct?
Yes.
So the Celtic peoples are occupying the lands at that time, and while the Romans are beginning to retreat and leave, they still have soldiers there, and what do they observe? What are they observing? What's happening to the Celtic people?
Well, they're assimilating, aren't they?
They're being invaded and attacked by the Germanic tribes. You know the Germanic tribes swept through all of Europe, right?
Pushy people.
What?
Pushy people.
Not yet. We'll get there, but not yet. Germanic tribes.
Yeah.
Came from the south.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're not there yet. That's right, Edith. Okay, so the Germanic, well, look at them. Look at them. Say to Edith's point.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're taking over. They're just like swarming. They're just covering Europe. And when they get up into England, what we know of now as England, they actually slaughter. They just slaughter the Celtic peoples that are there. And you might find it interesting to know that those that survived are called something by the Germanic people. They are called the Wilus. Does that sound like anything?
Welsh.
Excellent. Yes. Yes, exactly. So the Celtic peoples that survive this slaughter, this invasion by these Germanic tribes, and notice that I'm saying tribes, plural. There's different groups of them. They come in, and those that survived this, they become the Wilus, and that means foreigner and slave. So they're now calling the people that were already there. Now we're here, and you are the foreigner, and you are subject. You're subjective. You're subject to us. All right, but we do have some words of the old Celtic language that do survive and come down to us today. Do you know any of these words?
Yes. No, most of them actually.
Hooligan, yeah. Yeah, whiskey. Yep. Yep. So those are old Celtic words that we still have, that have survived, that we still have today. All right, now we know the Germanic tribes were different groupings of people, right? And as they invade and overtake this land, this island, they're not, the thought of, England or Britain doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. They split up the land, and you see how they've split it up?
Yes.
Okay, so we have Northumbria, Mercia, all right?
Anglia.
Yes. Now, East Anglia, I put an arrow there. Do you know why? Yes, who said that? Oh, yes, Jane, exactly, yes. Anglia, what does that become?
English.
England. That's where England gets its name, from this tribe, from East Anglia becomes England. That's where it gets its name. So these are different tribes speaking variations of different languages.
What is the approximate time frame that this is?
100, like the first century. So right now we're in, so the Romans were still there. They were there in 63 BC, and then it goes right up until like 500 AD. I'll say AD to be less confusing. All right, so they're settling these areas, and they've got it all kind of split up in this way. And when they come in, we've got some things that are familiar to us from the Germanic tribes. In fact, we've got a lot. All right, there's a lot of words that we know. All right, but one of the things that we might be most familiar with from the Germanic tribes is anything ending in HAM is what? Yes, and TON? Enclosure, yep. And ING?
People of.
Yeah, the people of. And we have those things here with us, right?
Yes, we do.
In our New World settlements, we have HAM, TON, ING. Now you might also know that there were counties that ended in shire.
Yes.
And shire is Latin, that comes in later. And that comes from the Latin language. But at this time, with the Celts and the Germanic tribes, it is thought by linguists that there were only about 25,000 words. Is that amazing? That they're speaking. That's incredible that they would have a whole language. Now, they don't just have words and speech, they also have a writing. They have a writing system. Does anybody know what it is? Have you ever heard of runes?
Yes.
Yes, so runes are an ancient language, and you can see See right here, see how kind of it has just straight lines? And that's because they didn't write with paper and ink or parchment or vellum. They wrote on what? Well, you can see. Yeah. Yeah, they wrote on stone, and if you're etching in stone, would it be easier to do straight lines? Yes, or if you're etching in wood. And so that's why their letters look like this. Okay, so these are the ancient rune letters. Do any of them, do they look familiar to you?
Some of them do, yeah.
Right?
There's a,
Can you see it? Can you see how it would be coming down to us? Do you see that?
yeah, and there's P.
Yes. Now there's something that you might be really familiar with, and perhaps you didn't know where it came from. Have you ever seen this logo?
Yeah.
What's that a logo for?
Hmm.
No? What is that? Do you know? Thank you. Bluetooth. Bluetooth, right?
It's what?
Bluetooth. Pat, you would not know anything about that.
No.
Okay.
She's off the grid. She's completely off the grid. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, Bluetooth. So how many people here have Bluetooth? All right. Do you know that the symbol represents an actual person?
Yes. King.
Yeah, you're right, Trudy. Yes. Harold Bluetooth. So these are the initials of Harold. Yeah, Effie, you're kicking yourself because we did a whole Viking series.
I know.
Remember?
Yes.
And we did Harold Bluetooth. Yes. So this is just his initials combined. So there's H and there's B, Harold Bluetooth, and that becomes the symbol for Bluetooth. So runes continue on today, but they've taken on kind of like a mystical quality, and some people still use them for divination and things like that. So I've got a clip here on the history of runes, the actual, history of runes.
Here are the rooms.
Hello friends, my name is Arif Erger, and today I'm going to talk about the historical background of the runes. Now, before we start with this, I would like to give a brief introduction to what the runes are. The runic alphabet is a set of symbols which identify the sounds of letters used in the languages spoken by the Germanic and Scandinavian peoples. The runic alphabet is called the Futhark, and this word is composed exactly by the first 6 letters of this alphabet. People often link the runes with the Vikings, which of course is correct, but the Vikings or the Viking Age is during the 8th century and the 11th century. That is the European medieval age, and the symbols of the runes go back in time a lot of centuries, in fact a millennium ago. The Vikings indeed spread the knowledge of the runes, because it was a time where people recorded history. But before that, like any written form, it evolves. So the runic symbols actually come from the Bronze Age. That's exactly what I will talk about today. We will go back in time 1,500 years before our Common Era, during the Middle Bronze Ages. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of images to better illustrate what I'm about to say, for a better understanding. The first image is a chart I've made with the symbols that identify the sounds of letters from 4 different civilizations that are North Germanic and go back in history into a time way before the Vikings. I will submit this chart in my Facebook page so you can check it out later. As you can see, the symbols are quite similar to the runes. Now, let's start with the first column, with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a civilization of Semitic origins from the Fertile Crescent in the easternmost coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. They were a maritime trading culture spreading all over the Mediterranean between the 16th century and the 5th century before our Common Era. The Phoenicians came in contact with the Greeks and the Minoans. In fact, The very first European naval battle was fought between Greeks and Phoenicians. By closing the westernmost maritime route, the Pillars of Hercules, nowadays called the Strait of Gibraltar, and the Hellespont, nowadays Istanbul, which allowed trading between the Mediterranean civilizations with the northern Europe. The trading connections helped in the development of the new form of writing for the better understanding and communication between civilizations. Now, let's go to the second column, to the Minoans. Like the Phoenicians, it was a Bronze Age civilization from the Isles of Crete. They came in contact with the Phoenicians, obviously, but there is no telling which form of writing influenced who. As you can see in the chart I've made, there are a lot of similarities between the two forms of writing. Now to the third column, the Tartessian language. The cultural area of the Tartessos was in the south of the Iberian Peninsula, nowadays Andalusia, Spain. Tartessos developed during the final centuries of the Bronze Age and the first centuries of the Iron Age. The first writing system to arrive at the southern coast of the Iberian Peninsula was brought by the Phoenicians at their arrival during the 8th century before our common era. Tartessos was the most important area of the Iberian Peninsula at this time. It was the area where different cultures connected and that created a new civilization. Tartessos results from the contact between the indigenous populations of the late Bronze Age of the Iberian Peninsula with the civilizations of traders coming from the east, which are the Phoenicians and the Greeks. Later, during the 4th century before our common era, Tartessos also had a great Celtic influence coming from the northern parts of the peninsula. Now the last column, the Iberians. Suffice to say, these were the indigenous people of the Iberian Peninsula who had maintained trading connections with every other European civilization since the Epipaleolithic, which means 10,000 years before our common era. I've shown you 4 different civilizations and what they had in common or similar, their form of writing. 4 different civilizations from the Bronze Age, way before the Viking Age. So how this form of writing reached the north? It's actually very simple. By maritime and inland waterways in the east and overland from the westernmost lands of Europe all the way to the Baltic Sea. As I have told you, these European inland connections go back to the Epipaleolithic and possibly way before that. So it's completely normal that these forms of writing were not brought by the Phoenicians, but it was an evolution in the Greek and Minoans territory, and then it spread inland through the connections of these European civilizations. Before the runes came to be what we know today, there was a great evolution in these symbols. The runes aren't an exclusive form of writing from the Scandinavian peoples. In fact, the runes, or these symbols that became the runes later in history, actually were a form of writing in all over Europe. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and all the links to my social media can be seen on the description.
So isn't that fascinating? That's fascinating. Effie, you probably really enjoyed that.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sure you
Enjoyed
did.
again, didn't they?
So we think of runes as coming from Scandinavia, but they didn't. They're far more ancient than that. And when we look at the runes, the rune writing, and then we look at the Latin writing, the symbols, see if you can see some similarities.
There
See
are.
if you can see the evolution right in front of us. All right, so speaking of Latin, all right, so we have the Celtics that were there, and we're getting some words and language from them. And then we have the Germanic tribes, right? And we're getting all kinds of words and language from all of them, correct?
Mhm.
And then who comes in next?
Well,
Religious.
Yes, yes, Trudy, excellent. Yes, the missionaries have to come to that, pagan island, right? And get them all squared away. So we've got the Latin missionaries coming, and they're bringing that language, aren't they?
Where are they coming from?
Spain, Italy,
The missionaries.
Rome. Yeah, they're coming from Rome because now Rome is Christianized,
Oh, okay.
right? You know that.
I know none of what you just said. That, you could have been speaking Greek to me for that whole thing. No idea. Never heard of it before.
What?
Any of what he's talking
Oh, what he said. I knew that would irritate you because you have a hard time with accents. I'm going to really, really, really be irritating you in just a
Why
minute.
do you mean the accent? I meant the information.
Because-
It was just overwhelming.
Well, what he's saying is that the runes, this writing that we have today, that we use today, goes way back, further than we even know. All right, so this is the Latin alphabet that they brought to England. Okay? And then let's take a look at that. Those are the runes. You see? See that?
Yeah, some are very similar.
Yes. And that really speaks to what the young man was saying.
Yeah.
That it comes from Phoenicians, Minoans, the Greeks, and it's gone up through Iberia. Yes, and then it's reaching. So this is ancient runes, and this is the Latin alphabet. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
All right, so now in England, because we've got missionaries there, they're on top of Celtic, and on top of German tribes. Now we've got what? Latin. We've got Latin folding in.
Backwards, right? Everything's
Falling into it.
Yeah,
It's all mixed up.
Okay.
yeah.
Like a mixing
And the
bowl.
Hebrew.
But it's a little more swirly. It's not so, straight. They don't have straight lines. Now,
But I mean, it goes left to right, or right to left instead of left to right. A, B, C, D goes sort of.
yeah, oh yes, yes. So, about 500 AD, when we have the Latin language kind of taking over and influencing the people, because it's becoming Christianized, we have Latin writing.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got Latin writing, and most notably, have you heard of Saint Bede,
Yes.
the Venerable Bede? Yes, so he's very well known for having written many, many, many books while he's a missionary in England. All right, and he's writing in what language?
Latin.
He's writing in Latin, but he's writing the Old English story, but he's writing it with Latin letters, so it's the English language being written with Latin letters. So what are we using today?
Latin letters.
Yes, we're using what's come down to us from this. Yep. So he writes a history of England, and he's writing the English language using Latin letters. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so that's how we get the writing that we have today. All right, now, would you like to hear some Old English? I won't play it for long because it's really hard to hear. All right, here's some Old English.
The Bath Old English Gospels, a treasure of the Parker Library at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge. This 11th century manuscript contains the earliest known continuous translation of the Gospels into English, to be precise, into Old English or Anglo-Saxon. Listen now to the biblical account of the birth and childhood of Christ from St. Luke's Gospel chapter 2 in the English of 10 centuries ago.
Special thanks to the Master and Fellows of Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, for their permission to reproduce images of MS-140. To learn more, visit the Parker Library on the web. And Gladiel Ellum. Happy Christmas to all.
So dlice, tham darum was je worden gebod from tham Casere Augusto, that al unbewirft were Homercod. Theus Homercodnes was erist geworden from tham demon Syria Chirino, and alle hi eodon and sundria ferdon on Hirachastre. Tha ferde Joseph from Galilea, of Herachastre Nazareth, on Judaische Chastre Davides, so is je nemned Bethlehem. For thanthe he was of Davides huse and herde.
Well, that was perfectly clear.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is Old English.
Yeah.
But there's some actual German words in that. Geworden
Yeah.
is a German word.
You see the influence? Do you see the influences, right? Yeah, you see the influences. So that is the language we speak today, and yet it is almost utterly unrecognizable, isn't it? It's almost completely unrecognizable. Well,
Sounded like someone from Scotland.
yeah, it did. It did. Yeah, it had the accent too. Yes. Yeah. You have to have the accent if we're talking about the origins of the language, right? So through Bede, now people are very interested in the eloquence of writing and language. And what do we have as a result of that?
We have stories.
The very first, have you all heard of Beowulf?
Yes.
Yes, that is, do you know that's the very first epic poem written in the English language. It's our very first epic poem. And we don't even know who our Homer is. We don't know who wrote it. And we don't know exactly when it was written, but it might have been written around 700 AD. It's a question, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful epic poem. So, all right, so now we've got all of these influences and everything's going beautifully well for the English language, right? The English language is doing what?
Thriving.
It's absolutely thriving, and we've got Beowulf, and we've got books, and we've got letters, and we've got all these things that you need, and it was going pretty well until something terrifying happened. Do you know what happened?
Yeah.
What?
Some war.
A war or something.
What happened? Does anyone know what happened that nearly caused the English language to go completely extinct? It happened in 793, and it happened, well, the best known one on Lindis Farm.
Plague?
The invasion of the Vikings. Yes.
They
The
always get in the way.
They do, don't they? Yeah, the Vikings raid Lindis Farm, all right, in 793, and when they do that, they just bowl them over, don't they? They bowl them over. I had a clip on Lindis Farm. I wanted to show it to you today, the ruins, but I don't think we'll have time for that. I'll do that next week, or if we have time, if I can, rush through to the end here, I will show it to you. And it was with this guy. He's a very good historian, but I'll save that for another time. All right, so what did the Vikings do? Do you remember? Yeah, they started attacking up here in Northumbria, and then they continue on and they go through all of this area, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, except there was one stronghold, and that was in Wessex. Yes. So in Wessex, there was a king. Now remember, there's a king. These are kingdoms.
Yeah.
This isn't England. These are kingdoms. England as a country is not even thought of. All right? So each of these areas is a kingdom with its own king. And the Vikings came in and they just plowed through. They just plowed through. And all of these other kingdoms buckle, except we've got somebody in Wessex, don't we? And that is Alfred the Great. Yes, so Alfred the Great is the only one that's able to stand up to the Vikings. Do you recall this story?
Yeah.
He stands up to the Vikings, he does battle with them, and what happens? Alfred wins. Alfred wins, and when he wins, they sign a treaty. This is the actual treaty. Here's the treaty right here. And the treaty says, now remember, this isn't the whole country, these are just kingdoms. So Alfred, in the treaty with the Vikings, has separated the lands in this way. All right, so this is under English, Anglo-Saxon rule, and then this is under Scandinavia. They're the Danes. All right, they're not called Vikings. They're the Danes. Okay, so they have this, and there's a line. There's a line, and you don't cross the line. You don't cross the line. There's not going to be any fighting. This is the treaty, but they are allowed to do what? Trade, exactly, Effie, yes. They are allowed to trade. So, as they're doing that, what's happening to the language?
Well, it's changing.
Yeah, so they're commingling through trade, and if they're trading, are they talking to one another?
Oh, God, they have to.
They have to. Yeah, they have to. So we've got the Norse language, or the language of the Danes, and we've got the Angles and their language that has developed. And then from that, look at some of the words that we still use in our English language that are synonyms. They don't replace a word, they just have a slightly different meaning. Okay? There's a little difference in the meaning of the word, but we can use all of these words, can't we? Yes. But while this was happening, Alfred the Great was getting nervous about the English language. He did not want to lose it. He saw that maybe it was going to be overrun by the language of the Danes. So what he did, Alfred, was he commissioned books, and guess what he wanted these books written in? Old English, exactly. So he had books written, which is quite a task, because of course, how do you write them? By hand. Yes, yes. This is before the printing press, and so it was quite an ordeal. And if he hadn't done that, was it possible that the Old English would have been lost forever?
Yes.
Yes, it is very possible that Old English would have been lost forever, and so they credit Alfred the Great for saving England and also for saving the language, Old English. Do you know that there's, well, they think that this is in tribute to Alfred the Great. Do you know that there is, did you see it? Yeah? Yeah, the white horse. Yes, I have a close-up of it.
Those are actual chalk in the land.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They've scraped.
isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yes, so that's, it's attributed to Alfred the Great. That's a monument to Alfred the Great. All right, so it almost went extinct. Whew. Right? We made it. Except it wasn't long after that it was in jeopardy once again. It's in jeopardy again. Does anyone know how that happened?
The invasion of the French?
Yes, excellent. All right, so this is where Conrad will be happy with me. Yes. All right, what's this? Does anyone know?
Oh,
The Normans.
no, it's the tapestry.
Yes, the Bayeux Tapestry
Yeah.
tells the story of 1066, the Battle of Hastings, right? when William the Conqueror, yes, he believed that he was promised what?
It was promised land.
The crown of England, the crown of England, and he felt like he was betrayed and usurped, and so William the Conqueror enters England and he fights Harold, and what happens?
Harold lost.
Harold lost. William won. And William's from where?
James from Normandy.
He's from Normandy. Yes. So what language does he speak? French. That's right. He speaks French. Did you know on the day of his coronation, he was crowned on Christmas Day, 1066. All right. So on the day that he was crowned, the English people who were conquered by him, well, they wanted to get along. You know, they wanted things to be okay. They didn't want to cause trouble. And so they were there. There was a group of them there. And when the king was crowned, they shouted out in appreciation, except the French soldiers didn't understand what that meant. And they went after them and burned their, they thought they were revolting. They thought it was like a war cry. They didn't understand what was going on because, you know, it was a language miscommunication. And so the soldiers went out to defend William the Conqueror. So what does William do? Well, you know, he moves in. And who does he bring with him? Yeah, his whole court is what now? French. His whole court is French. What about the nobility? They've been, they've plucked out the old ones and they were replaced with what?
The new one.
French nobles. The French nobles. Exactly right. So, what language is being spoken throughout England? French. What?
The people, the serfs,
Oh,
refused.
did I forget to mention something?
Yes, you did.
Oh, forgive me. You're right, Effie. The language, Old English, has to go underground. And it has to go underground for over 300 years.
Wow.
Over 300 years.
So they spoke it in secret.
Yeah, they
Well,
defied.
out in the farms
Yeah.
where there aren't any nobility. All right, so they had serfdom.
Yeah.
All right. So now, if the French noble happened to be wandering through their property that you're working on, that you're slaving on, right, for his profit, you wouldn't speak Old English. But he's hardly ever there. So what are you going to do? You're going to keep your language because everything else has been taken away. What are you going to keep? It was that important. They kept it alive. The serfs, yes, the peasants, out in the country, they're the ones that kept the language alive. But it has to go underground. But if you had to go to court or something, did you need to know some French?
Yes.
You did, because everything is being conducted in what language? French, exactly. Yes, so you needed to know both. You had to have that. But English goes underground. The people are not willing to give that up. And that goes on for 300 years. Some things occur to change all of that. Here again, it could have gone what?
The other way.
It could have gone away.
Yeah.
The English language could have gone extinct again. And it was only a couple of hundred years after the first threat. All right, but a couple of things happened. All right, English rises back up, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is a really, really bad king of England. You remember John?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the brother of Richard the Lionheart. Yes. He did a very poor job. Now, remember his mother had all these lands in France?
Yes.
So this was a part of what?
England.
England. So they had England and they had all these French territories as well. And look at how quickly John lost them. That's what, look at what John, this is all John had left. All right, so when that happens, take a look at the map here. Do you think that the French and the English were felt kind of cut off and disconnected now?
No, yeah, they hated each other.
So they're, yeah, oh my gosh, yes, for forever, they've been fighting forever. But because they don't have that connection that they had, right?
Right.
It would have been right here, and then this would have been just one big kingdom. They don't have that anymore, and so there's a disconnect. They're not the same people. They're not the same people right across the channel. So they're kind of, focusing inward, aren't they? Yeah, they're focusing inward, and they're starting to feel a little more English than French. All right? But that wasn't enough to make the big change and to resurrect the English language, the Old English language. Something really drastic had to happen. And the thing that was really drastic that happened was, somebody said it.
Black Plague?
Yes, yes, the Black Death. The Black Death. I mean, it seems unbelievable that the plague is what brought the English language back, but that's just what happened. The plague brought the language back. Why would that be? Why would that be?
French ran?
I love that you said that. Yes, the French ran. All right, but so we've got, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. But what's going to happen in the congested areas, the cities? What's going to happen? Yes, more people are going to die, right? And then, of course, what are the nobility going to do? Trudy just said it.
Run like hell.
They're out of there.
Yep.
They're gone. They're not sticking around. They're not going to help you out. They're not going to, make sure that things are being taken care of. No, they just took off and they are out of there. So if they're out of there, who's left? Who's surviving this fairly well? The people out in the country who have kept what? Yes, yes, they're the ones that refuse to let go. They still spoke it. And so now, if they are there and they are willing, to come into the cities in the aftermath and do the jobs that need to be done, and they've got a bigger presence, right? Then what's eventually obviously going to happen?
They're just gonna go back to
Authorities are going to need to deal with them, and they're going to need to deal with them in what language? In English, yes. So in 1362, Parliament is being conducted in what language for the first time in over 300 years? English. If you go to court, if you have a legal issue, you will be dealt with in what language? English, because now, with all the French gone, English is the predominant language. And then it's not long after that, in 1399, King Henry IV is coronated. At his coronation, he gives his speech, and what he says is, "My mother tongue," and what language is that? English. English. The king speaks in English for the first time in over 300 years, and people start thinking of themselves and are proud of being English. All right, and so again, the English language has been saved, and it was really like this close from completely going extinct.
And yet now it dominates the world.
Well, that's what I was going to tell you, yeah. And now it dominates the world, exactly. But what is English? So what can we say from all of that we just saw?
It's a conglomeration.
Exactly. Yes. The English language took a little bit from here and a little bit from there. Yeah. So we've got a whole bunch of influences that have created and made this one language and the writing that we use today. So I wanted to show you, there were so many French words. This one's for Conrad. There were so many French words, yeah. There are so many French words that we use today, and I just couldn't list them all, so I thought, I found this and I thought, well, this will have to do.
Yeah, there it is.
And there are hundreds more, hundreds of French words that we use.
Yeah. Melings.
Bon voyage.
It's your thing. There you are.
Nice.
Melings. Chic.
Sounds like
Look
our
at the chic.
diner, or chef.
Sounds like our chef.
Yeah.
They have all these weird names.
You can, we know they're French, right?
Right.
Yes.
Oh, enjoy the beat.
Yeah.
What, Tony?
If you don't know Conrad, we're all in trouble.
Which one?
Is that the mix of the potpourri that we have?
Potpourri, yes, thank you, Pat. Yes,
It's all that
potpourri.
smelly stuff that you put out
Yes.
in the bowl.
All right, now, what I thought I would do, because it just seemed to kind of go hand in hand with what we've been doing, would you all like me to start a series on
Oh, the human brain. Why not?
all right, so I thought next week I will start with anatomy and physiology. I'll make it interesting.
Of the brain.
All right, and then the one that you're really gonna be interested in is I will be doing one on memory.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Memory.
All right, yes. But I want to advertise that in the newsletter, so I'm going to make sure I can get that advertised first because I think that you'll all enjoy that one. So we will do one on memory, how it works, how they're created, and how to strengthen.
That would be good.
How to strengthen your memory. All right. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I answered all your questions, especially you, Pat. Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, I'll see you next week.